What's up, What's up, everybody? It's the Storm Writer here, or the Storm Writer. In my American English accent, you can't tell the difference between a T and a D, so when I say the Storm Writer or the Storm Writer, it sounds like the same thing. I am the Storm Writer. My handle is inspired by the Storm Writers a little bit. So the Storm Writers was a really cool movie from the late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. It was a Chinese movie with two adopted brothers who eventually usurp the throne of their father, who's a tyrant. Anyways, it's a really cool movie, so you should see the Storm Writers if you can. And I'm the Storm Writer. And I write a lot about psychology, and I write about art, experiences, life. I write about all kinds of things in those departments. I write about personal stuff. I write about stuff that it might be a little bit triggering, but most of the time I write about good things with a positive tone, and occasionally I get into some deep psychology because it's important to be authentic. Okay, today's podcast, I am reading my article or my piece. I wrote a piece on the noble Klingons and the transatlantic view of the Arabs. And I am live editing as I read it. So it's kind of a podcast. It's kind of an editing session that I'm putting out there. It's a little bit meta. It's a little bit behind the studio. And I'm excited to share this because I really like this piece. This piece deals with the Klingons. It takes a close look at the Klingons in Star Trek. And the goal is to better understand, okay, who are the Klingons? What are they all about? And why are they so similar to a culture we all know? A certain culture which I'm familiar with. And this article that I wrote is about where do we get ideas from, and how does the real world inform science fiction. All right, so I start with a quote. The title of the piece is "The Noble Klingons: The Transatlantic View of the Arabs." And what that tells us about perception. Okay. Revenge is a dish best served cold, said by Khan Noonan Singh, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, who refers to this as a Klingon proverb. It's actually a Spanish proverb. It's not an Arab proverb. It's not a Persian proverb. It's a well-known Spanish proverb. Khan is Persian. Noonan, I don't know, it's vaguely Persian. And Singh is Indian. So he's got a kind of Persian Indian name. So he's from the Orient, as someone would say, from the East, relatively speaking. Star Trek's conception of the Klingon race holds deeply rooted American stereotypes of Arabs and Middle Easterners. Star Trek became famous for the way it imagined the intergalactic community. They modeled their galaxy after their perception of the 20th century political world on Earth. From the American perspective, the Arabs were a barbaric, warmongering civilization deeply tied to its traditions and alienated from the Western, in quotes, modern world. By examining Star Trek, we can gain insight into how the West views Middle Eastern people, but first we need to revise our terminology because when the terminology is inaccurate, the understanding we get will always be false. We derive. The understanding we derive will always be false. Before we analyze and cancel colonial misconceptions about the Middle East, we must recognize that the Arabs are one of the sources of Western civilization and not the opposite or the counterpart to it. Through science fiction, writers, directors, and producers express their perspectives on their society and its relationship with others. Because these sci-fi creators have often been Americans, U.S. citizens, the humans in their stories often represent the Americans' view of themselves, while the alien races represent the foreigner. Since our favorite sci-fi movies and shows were written from the perspective, from the American eye, from the American perspective, I'm going to change eye to perspective. Since our favorite sci-fi movies and shows were written from the American point of view, we can see how they saw Arabs, people of color, and people of other societies. The episodes do not by any means represent an accurate or anthropological depiction of other people, but they show what image of us Americans, especially, they show the image of us that Americans they show how Americans, specifically white Americans, perceived Middle Eastern people in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Or Middle Eastern culture. No phenomenon reveals this principle more starkly and consistently than in Star Trek and the relationship between humans and Klingons. Many have theorized that Klingons in Star Trek represent Muslim and Arab society, and the Federation's relationship with Klingons reflects the West's relationship with the Muslim world. In fact, I'm going to say many have theorized that there's two things here, and I'm just going to make it one. The Federation's relationship with the Klingons reflects the West's relationship with the Muslim world. Okay, I'm going to change that to Transatlantic. The same is true for many other science fiction projects where transatlantic culture represents reason, while alien cultures, be they Klingon, Moclan, Krill, Freeman, or Korrigarian, represent backwardness, obsession with tradition, and rejection of liberal ideals. I'm going to change that to primitiveness. Primitiveness, obsession with tradition, and liberal ideals. Okay? All aspects of honor derive from honesty. A liar cannot truly be honorable, for where is the honor in deception? Okay, so this is a quote from the Klingon Art of War. Remember, there's a Chinese art of war in real life, and then there's supposedly a Klingon art of war. So here is, in this quote, is encapsulated the idea that the Klingons are so primitive that they would never use deception to triumph in war. They would only use might or power or force. And that's just not true or accurate of any culture. All cultures in war are open to the idea of using trickery or deception or spying, espionage, misleading their enemy, luring their enemy. That's all part of war. There's no culture that says we never use deception in war. We only use physical strength or power or might. And it's certainly not the case in Arab culture. In Arab culture, it's perfectly acceptable to mislead your enemies, to deceive your enemies. It doesn't go against bravery. You can beat them by the numbers, or you can beat them by strategy. Deception is strategy in war, after all. It's a matter of survival. Okay, so the transatlantic culture. I can't single out post-colonial America for viewing other cultures as alien, irrational, or inferior. This is a clear trend among transatlantic cultures. The transatlantic must include the rest of the colonial powers: the British, the French, the Dutch, the Italians, and the Spanish, to name a few. Generally speaking, the space that joins Western Europe and the USA and Canada is the transatlantic. The colonial North Americans are themselves descended from Western Europe. So we have to clump these cultures together for their close shared history and movements which shape their intellectual culture. That is to say, this is different from talking about the West. The Western culture, which the Arabs preserved and helped develop into what it is what the Arab world, the Middle Eastern world, is part of that. Christianity, Judaism. There would be no Judaism if it wasn't for Middle Eastern people who then became the Arabs. There would be no Judaism if it wasn't for Middle Eastern people who then became the Arabs. Ancient Greece is more similar to the Arab world than it is to France or Spain. The Greeks were not very far away from Alexandria. And you can take a look at this with all cultures. The Greeks, the Turks, a lot of different cultures, the Persians, in a very small space, interchanging power throughout the last 2,000 years. And that's really what produced Western culture. And it kind of spread out. It spread out into Western Europe and the United States and England, okay, and even before the United States. So that westward expansion is just a westward expansion of Western culture from Jerusalem and from Tehran out into Boston and Chicago. That's all. It's all it is 5,000 years of Western expansion of Middle Eastern culture. That's all that the West is. So the Middle East, being the origin of the West, cannot be removed from the West. But you can talk about the transatlantic culture. You talk about Spanish folks, French folks, English folks, white North Americans, white Canadians, and their shared history, and white Mexicans, frankly, and their shared history, because so much trade and so much culture exchange crossed the transatlantic in the last 500 years, making those people think that they have more in common than not when compared with people from India, people from the Philippines, people from South Africa. Okay. I can't single out. Okay, so what did we say? In this article, I'll refer to this superculture as the transatlantic. The transatlantic is a mega cartel. At times, there's war within itself, but its members are united by common belief that the white European, wherever they live, is superior in rationality and intellect to any other being, be it by a way of history, culture, or heredity. Now, I'm not saying that these are my views. Please don't take me out of context. This is what these people think. This is how these people view themselves. I'm sure many people in the transatlantic no longer hold the view that they're any different from people of other origins or races. But there's a subtext or a subtext assumption in the culture that the culture is the best version of human culture. So wherever they live is superior in rationality and intellect to any other being by way of history, culture, or heredity. For this reason, in my writing from now on, I'll refer to the collective identity of Europe, colonial North America, colonial Australia, even colonial Australia, as the transatlantic, regardless of its location. It's transatlantic in identity. I don't refer to these continents as the West because Western civilization begins with the study of Mesopotamia, Goleki Tepe, I don't even know how to pronounce that one actually, I haven't heard it pronounced, and the Nile Valley. It does not begin with Athens or Rome, although Athens is very critical. Moscow or Berlin, it does not begin with those. That's not where it started. The Middle East is the West. It's confusing because it's called the Middle East, but it is the West. Jesus was born in Palestine, not in Paris, and Islam is a Western religion, just like Judaism and Christianity. So in my view, Iranians, Arabs, and Ethiopians are Westerners, even Ethiopians. Yes, Christians, they are Westerners. The transatlantic linguistic heritage is essentially Middle Eastern. It is preserved in Arabic, Amharic, Hindi, and Persian. The linguistic heritage is preserved in Persian. The linguistic heritage is in Hindi and Amharic. Meaning its origins are those that you speak an Indo-European language. If you speak Portuguese, French, English, etc., you will discover the roots of those languages are all Indian and Persian. And Arabic informs English, and Arabic informs French and Spanish. And we'll see that Amharic, which is basically almost the same language, a similar language to Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke. So how can we not say that those four languages are original languages to the language we speak now? You know, they're the Arabic or Amharic or Hindi or Persian spoken 2,000 years ago must be different than it is now. But a lot of the connections are found there, right? A lot of the reasons we say I am is because of Persian. The reasons why we say he is being or I don't want to be like this is because of Arabic. And in Hindi, they have tu me, you, me. In Spanish, they have tu me, you, me. So it's bizarre how something can get from India to Spain unchanged. Tu me, you, me. How can that be? It's a miracle, but it's there. The Arabs preserved Greek philosophy and then gave it to the transatlantic, or the latter found it in Arabic texts. The Arabs developed medicine and cured the ailments of the transatlantic culture in its infancy. Infancy. Oh my gosh. Infancy. Your mother has a smooth forehead. A Klingon insult. All right. I like that one. Let's see. I got time. All right. So I'm up to the second half of this article. It's a really, really long article. Okay. But so far, so good. The transatlantic view of the Arabs and others. Star Trek's view of the Arabs and others. Star Trek informs us greatly on how the transatlantic views the Middle East and the rest of the world. When we talk about the alien races in Star Trek, we must be sure to note that we are discussing the transatlantic view of other societies and not the actual societies themselves. We are not making comparisons between these fictional races and actual Arab Muslim people because there are no comparisons to be made. These are fictional races merely they merely show how transatlantic people view or how they imagine Muslims, not how they really are. These stories are written within the transatlantic culture, and their perception of Arab people is very different from reality. Okay, and it's not supposed to be. Even any flattering representations are made superficially from a faraway great vantage point, a distance vantage point. It's useful to watch how Star Trek depicts Klingons because we can better identify the biases of the transatlantic towards Arabs and Muslims. This allows us to point out racist assumptions that go easily unnoticed in New York, Toronto, Paris, or London. These misconceptions are embedded in daily interactions with Arab people in the Middle East and abroad. Trekkies themselves risk seeing Middle Easterners as two-dimensional characters, equating them with early perceptions of Klingons. The Klingons have a pervasive and dominant culture and religion which seems to dictate every person's daily life as well as the honor, status, rights, and rites of passage. You could say that Klingons cling on to their traditions. I think we now know where they came up with the name. They cling on to their traditions, so we could say they cling on. Okay, it's terrible. I really regret knowing that. Some Klingon traditions seem valid and others seem barbaric and violent. Here are some fun ones I cut and pasted from a great database on Klingon culture. Check out the article to see the link. I put a link there. Genau, Juk, Hol, Pashart. I don't know. Klingon law of heredity. A son shall inherit the honors or shame of his father. Manhood tradition. A Klingon youth was considered a man on the day he could first hold a blade. Okay. Honestly, in Arab culture, we don't have that. We don't have you're considered a man the day you could first hold a blade, and we don't have if your dad was shamed, you're also shamed. Although there is an honor shame culture, so I get the idea, but it's not that pronounced, right? You're still your own person, regardless of what your father did. Shame within one's lifetime, right? Shame, what your son does might affect your honor as a father, but not the other way around. You get to be your own person. Okay, makto for. Ritual killing of an individual so that his honor can be restored. Okay, that's a bad one because there have been ugly incidences of ritual killing or honor killing in the Middle East. It's a little bit of a backwards tradition. You don't find educated people behaving this way. You only find people that are attached to tribal societies, and there are tribal societies in the Middle East. Going back to the old days. But it's not an urbanite behavior. It's a tribal, nomadic behavior. When a Klingon warrior is accused by the council, he has the right to challenge them. Okay. He presents evidence to the council, which then passes judgment. While being heard, the challenger appoints a chadich, a second who stands with him during the trial. Results of challenges can be exoneration, discommendation, or even death. All right. Those are some quoted little bits from that I pulled in. I pulled them in. Why? To see how do any of these habits or laws match up with our perceptions of Middle Easterners, right? Our assumptions about them. It's accurate that Middle Eastern society is an honor-shame culture, but we are not all perfect adherents to that culture. The stereotype is that every Muslim is pious, that every female is modest, that every male is a warrior ready to fight for their honor at the drop of a hat. These ideas apply to some people, but Middle Easterners are not a monolith. We have intellectuals, poets, musicians, hippies, and artists. We are capitalist, mercantile societies, even though the militaries dominate our political structure in many countries. It's not true that all citizens are initiated into a culture, a warrior culture like the Klingons. So, We are capitalist, mercantile societies, and even though the military, how about this? The military dominates the political structure in many countries. It's all citizens, not all citizens. Citizens, not all citizens are initiated into a warrior culture like the Klingons. The war-bound Arab would be a feature of the transatlantic lens, in my view. So the Arab warrior would have a lot of prominence in a transatlantic view, in my estimation. I'm using view so much that everything is a view. I want to explore some principles to unchain Klingons to Arabs. The first principle is one. Aren't some of these cultural expectations unrealistic in the real world for any society on Earth? So that means we can't all be warriors. You need other types of people. The second is two. Aren't some of these cultural depictions accurate for Arab societies, but also applicable to every single society on the planet? Aren't they essential for any society of people? So what I mean by that is, isn't it true that the Americans have a very powerful military? Wouldn't it be reasonable to assume that they're a military culture? And then when you get to America, you're surprised that not everybody is in the military or not everybody's into the military culture. Wouldn't it be reasonable if you were conquered by the British to assume the British are all soldiers and warriors, and then when you get to London and you meet chimney sweepers and apothecaries and all kinds of other professions and trades, and you're like, oh, okay, I thought they were all a warrior culture. So honor-shame culture. I have let's begin here for some reason. I'm going to take that out. Honor-shame culture. It's true that the Middle East holds many tribal cultures where the principles of honor and shame dictate people's lives. When we learn about Middle Eastern norms, we might be shocked by the ones that are new to us. But it's easy for the transatlantic people to convince themselves that they don't have an honor-shame culture. Doesn't the transatlantic have values that bestow honor or shame upon people, and what categories of behavior bring shame upon them? While I won't try to enumerate them, I think that the transatlantic tend to value service, especially military service. They tend to value intellectual achievement, and they tend to value fidelity to the nuclear family. When I think of the United States, I feel strongly that they have an honor-shame culture towards certain okay. So this is kind of redundant. It can vary by region, but generally, okay. What I'm seeing here is that I wrote the same thing twice, so I'll delete it. Service and public safety, such as law enforcement, fire and rescue in the medical field, is also valued. At the same time, Americans consider many behaviors shameful. Racism and prejudice are examples of behavior that Americans no longer approve of. Also, generally speaking, it's shameful for American men to lose control of their emotions and display anger or rage openly. But in the Middle East, it's really not considered a big deal, especially in the city. Rites of passage. Lots of Americans don't think they have rites of passage in their culture. I once worked with an American teacher who I really liked and admired, but one thing she said to me was a little bit odd. She said that in American society, they don't have rites of passage. and that they need them badly. So I said, wait a minute, what about graduation ceremonies? Aren't they rites of passage? As a matter of fact, most schools and towns have mini graduation ceremonies after kindergarten, after fifth grade, after when a child goes to middle school, and then high school. There's middle school graduation, there's a high school graduation, there's a college graduation. Okay, I'm going to put and here. This is high school graduation, okay. And there are even graduations from college and graduations from graduate schools. All those are rites of passage. Then, of course, there's marriage and marriage ceremony, which is separate from the marriage reception. And there are wedding anniversaries and funerals. The 20th, the 30th, the 40th, the 50th wedding anniversaries hold special significance. All of these events are rites of passage. They're just modern ones. They may not have the same type of communal contributions that local tribal rites of passage have, but if you look at graduations, you'll see that the community comes together. There's music before, during, and after, and there are speeches. And there are, without doubt, costumes, special robes. Special robes that graduates wear as teachers or professors. As students, teachers, or professors. Our modern communities tend to value, let's see, where am I? They tend to value different things than tribal ones. We may not specifically mark the age of becoming an adult, but we mark the time at which a person is intellectually prepared to enter the working world, or the academic one. We mark the time at which a person is ready to start a family. We mark changes in intellectual growth through graduation and changes in one's role in society through anniversaries, through parties for retirement or promotion. And well, through parties. Okay, I'm starting to lose myself here, and I'm at the end of this for now. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to fix this one and I'm going to wrap it up. Okay. We may not. What's something that's we may not mark the passage into adulthood, but I think we do because itself. But we do mark the time. But we don't mark it physically, like bar mitzvah and things like that, but we mark the time at which a person is intellectually prepared to enter the working world, or the academic one. We mark the time at which a person is ready to start a family through marriage, with a wedding. We mark a time, okay. And so some of this is repeated. It changes intellectual growth through anniversaries, parties, retirements, promotion. And we mark the time at which we are ready to enjoy our golden years with a retirement party. All right, I think that's a good way to end that one. At the end of the day, parties are our rites of passage. They may seem informal and intuitive to us, but to an outsider, they would seem just as ritualized as tribal passage rites, or what's another way? As a tribal ceremony or spiritual invocation. We also have religious ceremony. I want to say that. I want to make sure I say that we also have religious ceremonies. So all of our modern religious ceremonies counted as active rites of passage, be they what? Be they whether you are Catholic, Christian, Catholic, or let's just say whether you're a Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, regardless of your religion. Regardless of your faith. Regardless of your faith. I'm going to move that. Okay, so I have this sentence about let's ignore the fact that we have religious rites of passage ceremonies. Okay. Baptisms. Bar mitzvahs. Bar mitzvahs. I don't think I spelled it right, or is it two words? Now I spelled it right because it's two words. Okay, so let's ignore the fact that all of our religious ceremonies count as active rites of passage. You might think of baptisms and bar mitzvahs as good examples of modern religious rites of passage. But lots of Americans don't think that they have rites of passage in their culture. Outside of religion, lots of Americans don't think that. So here's what I said. All these events are rites of passage, so they're just modern ones. They may not have the same type of communal contributions as local tribal rites of passages have, but if you look at traditions, you'll see that the community comes together. There's music before, during, and after. There are speeches. Okay, I'm sort of supporting what I just said. Our modern communities tend to value different things than tribal ones, and we may not specifically mark the passage into adulthood itself, but with graduations, we mark the time at which a person is. Did I already say this? We mark the time as which. I think I already said that. No. Okay. We mark the time which. Okay, so I didn't say that again. At the end of the day, parties are rites of passage. They may seem informal and intuitive to us, but to an outsider, they would just seem just as ritualized as tribal ceremony or spiritual invocations. Okay. I think this is enough for now, is how I end this article. I think this is enough for now. Would you like to add your input and explore the lens through the colors? Let's talk about it. Comments are welcome. And then I'm going to add leave a comment. All right, so button, leave a comment. Okay, and send a message. Why not? And then join the chat and subscribe. Thanks for reading. Okay, it's all down there. All my buttons are down there. And what other pictures? So I only have one picture. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to close this podcast, then I'm going to add some pictures from things that I thought of to mention. Just grab them and throw them in there. You need a lot of pictures. Okay. Thank you for listening to my first podcast where I edit one of my articles. This has been fun for me, and I hope it's been fun for you. Have a good one.